Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Balie. I'm very glad that you're all here for this special evening about Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, the two faces of Giorgia Meloni. And my name is Catarina Schul. I'm an editor and moderator here at the Balie, and this evening was edited by my colleague, Brit van Rossum. And we're going to try to discuss, well, probably we're not going to manage, but the whole career of Giorgia Meloni. Who is she? She's this one of this elusive, one of the more, I think, most intriguing politicians in Europe. She's been in office now for almost 4 years, and in a little bit more than a year, there's going to be new elections in Italy, so we're very much on time to discuss her prospects and also what we think we will see in the future of Italy. And I think I'm very curious here if there's anybody from Italy tonight with us. Can you raise your hand? I'm not coming to you, don't worry. Okay, we have some Italians. Okay, nice. Buonasera. What we're going to do today, we have some experts for you. We have selected really the top shelf of experts that know everything about politics, populism, just politics in Europe in general, and also, of course, Italy and Giorgia Meloni, the case of Giorgia Meloni. And first, in the first panel, we're going to focus a little bit more on the domestic policies and domestic view on Giorgia Meloni. Who is she? What do the Italians think of her? Maybe it's not the same as the Italians here. I don't know. Maybe it's also, I mean, of course, not one opinion on her. And also, what has she been doing for the last 4 years? I mean, of course, in the Netherlands, we see some front pages of stuff she does, but of course, we don't see everything here. So we're going to have a very quick, but hopefully conclusive image of what she's been doing and what kind of policies, what kind of things she's delivered on. And then in the second panel, we will zoom out a little bit more and look how she's perceived more international, on an international level, on a European level. I mean, of course, there's this Euroscepticism that we're familiar with of Giorgia Meloni, but how is this changing now? And of course, also her relationship with the United States, the President of the United States in specific, Mr. Donald Trump. And as you know, probably, Meloni is known for her sensational speeches. Either you like them or you don't, but they're sensational either way. And that's why we also named this program after probably one of her most famous ones, what she says, sono Giorgia, sono una donna, sono una madre, sono italiana e sono cristiana. And it's for this program we have selected a couple of speeches to dive into her ideology, to kind of give an example of how her paradoxes, of her ideology, of her person, of her character, of her as a politician are visible in these speeches and everything that she's doing. And we've picked these speeches from a documentary that's called Giorgia Meloni, The Power of the Clans, that's broadcasted by Arte. And we will only see a couple of pieces of the documentary, but I think I can speak on behalf of all the speakers on the first and the first line here in the front row. We really recommend you to watch the whole thing. That's still, I think, after tonight, there's still a lot to see and to experience with her. And before I go any further with my speakers here, I have some practical information that I want to share. This program is approximately 90 minutes, so yes, there will be an ending, and yes, you can go to the toilet in between if you need to. It's outside to the left. You can always come back. This program is live streamed on YouTube. You can watch it back later, send it to friends if you like. We would really appreciate that. There is a Q&A after the panels. This will also be broadcasted on live stream, so keep that in mind if you want to ask a question. And there's a party next door in the other space. We're renting also the Balie. We're renting out half of the Balie tonight, so we're really hoping that we won't have any disturbance. We're trying our best, and if so, we'll try to manage it as quickly as possible. So without further ado, I want to introduce my speakers. That is Catharina de Vries, Rosa van Gol, and André Zasloven. Give them a warm applause. I will introduce you a little bit more extensively on who you are and what you've been doing. Next to me, Catharina de Vries. She's a Dutch political scientist, expert in European politics, populism, radical right-wing parties in Europe. She's worked at the Bocconi University in Milan and is currently Vice Dean and Professor of Political Science at University in Madrid. And in addition to her academic work, recently her book came out, Symphony of Discontent, Symphony van Onvrede, on the rise of radical right in Europe. Very nice that you're here. And next to you is Rosa van Gol, a Dutch journalist, author, editor. She writes reports and columns for de Volkskrant, NRC, de Gids, also for the Groene Amsterdammer. And until recently, she was a correspondent based in Rome, and also specifically in the period that Meloni rose to power. And she's back now, very soon, actually tomorrow. Her new book is coming out, Via Italia. We have it here, and yes, there's a QR code. You can scan it and you can buy it. About her time as a correspondent in Italy. And there in front of me we have André Zaslove, an associate professor of the political science at Radboud University in Nijmegen. He specializes in comparative politics with a strong focus on populism, political parties, and the transformation of radical right-wing parties, and specifically also in Italy. He's the author of The Reinvention of the European Radical Right, Populism, Regionalism, and the Italian Lega Nord, not an unimportant or small part of populism, I think, in Italy. Very glad that you're all here. I'll start with you, André, because we'll talk about it more extensively, of course. Giorgia Meloni has a long political career in Italy, but wasn't necessarily in the public eye until more recently now. When did she catch your attention?
It's funny you say that, because said you were going to start with this. I didn't think about what I was going to say. And to be quite honest, I think, obviously I'd sort of heard, when she begun her party in 2012. And
the Fratelli d'Italia.
Fratelli d'Italia, and I was obviously aware of her presence. But it was really sort of during the time of the Draghi government, when she was one of the few outsiders of the government, right? And the rest of even Salvini and the rest of the whole clan joined in, and she played this role of the opposition. And that was kind of the first time, right? I mean, but she still was there, pretty low in the polls.
And what caught your attention? So that was the first time she caught your attention, but what specifically struck you?
Well, to be quite honest, what really struck me was, her break with Berlusconi. To be quite honest, her break with Forza Italia, and in some sense, we're going to talk about this and the extent to which. Part of what was going on at that time was her party was an objection to what was going on the center right, and that's what struck me. But I think we'll get into that.
Well, a little bit of dissipation. And Katharina, how was this for you? When did you recognize her as sort of a prominent or interesting person to watch as a political thinker?
I think it was similar to the Draghi government for those of us who were living in Italy at the time. But I think I can't remember now exactly, because I would have looked it up if I knew that was exactly the question. But I don't know if it was in the forming of the government, which of course is with Lega and Forza Italia, or it was already to make the coalition that you need in order to run the election in Italy, that she asked Berlusconi to come to her. And I think that for people who know Italian politics was kind of a big thing. Well, because Berlusconi, that is something, I guess, that you don't really understand. And at least for me, I don't know. We have also many Italians in the room. But I think the fascination and the continued fascination with Berlusconi was always very different outside of Italy than inside of Italy. There's an airport named after him when he passed away, and many people didn't fully understand that. When you understand the political history of Italy and the fact that he actually, and we'll come back to that, but finished a term and was prime minister twice in a very unstable environment, that was clear. So he was kind of the kingmaker.
Like a pillar.
Exactly, the kingmaker very much. And so the fact that she, and I guess maybe also from a gendered perspective in Italian politics, in many, by the way, European politics, that it was not so common. This country hasn't had a prime minister that's female, right? Yeah. That then this important person had to come to her rather than she coming to him.
Yeah. And did you have a specific moment that has not been told yet?
No, it has been told. I would like to use the occasion to point out something else, which I think is interesting, because, of course, people have asked me many times, why did people vote for Giorgia Meloni? And there are many reasons, and we will come to them. But I think one of them to remember is that there is a big disappointment in politics in all of Europe, but in Italy it's very strong. And I think it was a very significant moment when all the parties joined the Draghi government. And
this was in 2021
during
crisis.
the pandemic, after an incomprehensible political crisis, as happens every 1 or 2 years in Italy. And Giorgia Meloni said, no, I'm not joining that government. And I think that was really the basis for her victory.
Sort of like this anti-establishment underdog.
But also just very simple. Like I've spoken to a lot of voters, and they said in the election campaign, they told me, well, now it's her turn.
Yeah,
you know?
let's give her a shot.
Yeah, let's give her a shot.
Yeah. And you lived in Italy for 5.5 years, if I'm correct. You were already mentioning it a little bit. Before we watch a little video clip, I just want to touch upon sort of what was so appealing about her that people were saying, let's give her a shot. Is that only because she was not participating in a Draghi, or was there something else about her that was appealing to many people to vote for her?
I mean, of course, you have to be right-wing to vote for Giorgia Meloni. There's no question about that. Yeah. But I think there's also, it's easy to underestimate the amount of cynicism that exists in Italy about politics, and nihilism, if you like. And I think you've seen that with the victory of the rise of the Movimento 5 Stelle, the five-star movement, it's hard to call them leftist, it's hard to call them rightist. They were anti-establishment, is the best description. And I think that's definitely also part of the attraction of Giorgia Meloni. Also the fact that she's a woman, I think, is part of it. In a country, no country for women, I think if you're a woman that comes to that position, it says something about your ability, regardless of, let's say, political ideas.
We're going to watch a short video clip because, as has kind of been anticipated, Meloni has been politically active since she was very young. At 15 years old, she joined a youth movement of the Italian social movement, the MSI, a neo-fascist party founded by former Mussolini supporters. And her current party, Fratelli d'Italia, also has roots in this tradition. And I would like now to show a fragment of the documentary that tells us a little bit about her past and this past in specific.
héritier direct de Mussolini.
as I said before, quite sensational. Andre, what does this tell us? She's very actively telling us, I have nothing to do with these commissionaire, they had this nickname for people who were fascist, militant fascist in the old days. How do you view this as a professor?
Well, so this is the question, right? I mean, basically you're asking me, is Meloni a fascist, right? I mean, that's basically what we're wondering in some sense. And it's a difficult question, right? We saw this. We saw what she just said, and just a couple of days ago, she just said, and La Russa, her important member of her party, and important member of the parliament, just said that Giorgio Almirante was a great statesman, and Giorgio Almirante was a fascist. He came up through the MSI, and he was a fascist. So I mean, really, the question then becomes, and she's never reputed this past, right? This what we see there is her past, right?
Does that make someone a fascist?
Well, this is the question, right? So this is the question. So then the question, why do we care about that question, and why do we ask the question, right? And I think the answer has to do with several different things, and one has to do with what do we mean by fascism, right? And what do we mean by fascism? And in some sense, when we're asking this question, I mean, I don't know, you're not asking it this way, but rhetorically, we're basically saying, is Italy a fascist? Is going to be, is it a threat? Is fascism a threat in Italy, right?
Well, you wrote, yeah. When she rose to power, you wrote, alarm bells about rising Italian fascism are exaggerated. Just to put you in a corner already.
So let me say. So I would say this way. I would say it this way. First of all, we have to think about what we mean by fascism, and if we're saying is Meloni right now, if we look at her party, look at her ideology, and what they're doing, then it's not per se fascism, right? I mean, people didn't vote for her just because there's fascists who vote for her, sure, and believers, but I mean, this is not why she came to power. And I think if we were to look at her party platforms right now, it would be more along the lines of a radical right party, a conservative party with a nice dash of pragmatism, right? I mean, if we would look at it this way. Which doesn't mean, and we can open up the discussion, which doesn't mean that she's not a threat for democracy.
Or has
right?
links with.
Or links, exactly. But where I think that the way, what this is still important. So I would say, if you say, does it matter that she's a fascist or that she was a fascist? I mean, we don't know what's in her head, right? It is important in many circumstances, and it's particularly important when and this is the most important thing I think that's going on, and we can see what other people think about this. It has to do with history and memory and how Fratelli is trying to integrate a tradition that was external into the current Italian Republic.
What do you mean by what kind of tradition?
What we have to, there's a couple of things. I mean, so one thing, I mean, people always accuse Italians of being, especially after the Second World War, of being too easy on fascists, allowing the fascists, and unlike in Germany and these countries, of being too easy. But we have to remember that the Italian Republic after the Second World War was built on anti-fascism, and this was part of the identity, right? And we can talk about the whole resistance movement, and this is key to Italian identity, but also the institutions of Italy.
Yeah.
So if we talk about Italian politics as being fragmented, and the two chambers have equal powers and all this kind of stuff. This was an engineering, because afraid of a centralization of power, right? And also the power of the Constitutional Court, which is a very progressive institution, and Italians are very proud of there's Italians here, they can tell me I'm wrong. My sense is that Italians are pretty proud of the Constitution. So this is built on an anti-fascism. So then you have a fascist party or a neo-fascist party that was within and without the state, right? And so there was a party that was part of, and what's going on now is through different sort of symbolisms and stuff. They're reworking history. There is an attempt to reintegrate a stream, the neo-fascists that were outside,
with the goal of being proud of it, with the goal of
Yeah.
What specifically would you say?
I mean, but that's the interesting thing, right? I mean, because so when I was thinking in the last couple of days, I mean, Meloni, you have the 2 faces of Meloni, but it could be the 10 faces of Meloni, to be quite honest, right? I mean, but why, right? I mean, so Meloni is the most successful centre-right party now. She's going to win the next elections if the centre-left doesn't pull it together.
That's where you're putting your money on?
Sure. If the centre-left doesn't
Everyone?
put their...
Okay.
Yeah, if they don't pull it together... Well, she won the elections in part because the centre-left lost the elections, right? So anyway, we can talk about that. But so she's a successful politician. So just why does she then keep going back to people like Almirante? This is an interesting question. Why do you do that, right? I mean, you don't need to, right? But so why do you do that? So there's something else going on.
Let's put this question towards Catharina. Do you have an idea?
Of why she does that, or
and
why?
how to kind of understand these links that she's putting out there towards fascism, and how to understand if the question is she's a fascist is even relevant. Can we answer this?
Yes. So I have an idea, but that's maybe not shared by all social scientists. I'm still a scientist. That fascism is more historically situated in a particular period in European history, because it also involves a full-on militarization of society. And that is not what we're seeing right now. But I guess what we're talking about is not that particularly, but what we're talking, I guess, is what political scientists would make the difference between radical right and extreme right. And in Dutch, it's uiterst rechts, and then radicaal and extreem. So it's like the far right is a group that involves both the radical right and the extreme right. And I'll say the difference between the two things. So the extreme right are basically people who you could maybe also put in admirers of fascism, i.e. that do not support liberal democracy in the way that we know it, which means not only having elections, but having guarantees constitutionally, minority rights, a whole set of other things, enshrined things, very strong in Italy, as Andrea, I think, was talking about. And then radical right are people who hold certain types of issue positions which were perceived as more radical than the right. The right was usually less state intervention in the economy. What they're doing is anti-establishment, anti-migration, conservative family values, like a whole lot of other things.
And where would we put Meloni?
So I think that Meloni within her party is more on the radical right side than on the extreme right side, but there are factions within her party that are definitely extreme right, and she might have gone through a tradition herself. So if you look at her, so then the question becomes, is she strategic?
Yeah.
Right? Or is this a fundamental change of heart? You get older and you realize that,
You get milder.
Exactly, you get milder. Exactly. Well, that was also a discussion in the Netherlands, right?
Yeah, milder.
So one thing is just, and I got a little bit of...
Without success.
I got a bit of slack for that because I wrote that in the column that I do monthly in the Financial Dagblad, so a newspaper here, that I said that if you look at the party program and you look at the speeches, Geert Wilders is way more extreme than Giorgia Meloni. So that is, so I think if we're talking about that, I'm not saying that her party is less, right?
As mentioned, there is party members.
I just think in terms of how they're operating. So then for me, the thing is that she's, and you saw that now, she's one of the clear political talents in post-war Italian politics.
What makes her a talent? If you have to just explain shortly to us.
So what she just did is what a artist in the Melkweg or an artist in Paradiso does. She gets the entire crowd with her, right? So that doesn't work everywhere. I remember a speech she gave I live in Spain now. My husband is Spanish. I have a strong bond also to Spain as well as to Italy. She gave a speech on a Vox, which is the kind of party in radical right party in Spain, and she did this. And the Spaniards were like, oh my God, what is this? So this was like way too much for that audience. So she knows what works well for certain parts of the Italian audience, and she captures this really well. And I think what is the interesting thing about her is that what I think I didn't realize fully until I lived in Italy were two things. That social conservatism on the right is a very normal thing to have. You have doctors that refuse to give abortions, even though it's legal in Italy. That's right. In the Netherlands, that would be much more of an outcry. We've seen it in many different things. So that's one. The second element is that in comparison to some other radical right politicians, she seems moderate. And the person I'm thinking about is that we all know Matteo Salvini, right?
Yeah.
She seems
the leader
like
of Lega
a
Nord.
very reasonable, or Lega now, right?
Yeah.
So of a very reasonable kind of politician in comparison to a kind of, I would call, sorry to say, chaos agent, which is Matteo Salvini, that just throws bombs into politics all the time in a way that's similar to Geert Wilders, I think, right? So I think she's
like a voice of reason.
Well, in comparison to the rest,
only in comparison,
right? In comparison to the rest, she seems pretty reasonable, and that I think is her appeal partly, right? That she, and I think part of it, and that was already said before. And the last thing is, I mean, on this, is that also the voice on the left is so divided, right? So part of the Italian electoral system means that you get more votes. I'm not going to explain everything, but you get more votes if you have electoral coalitions, and the left was not able to do it because Movimento 5 Stelle, which now is really more on the left than it was, led by Conte. Is he still? Yeah, I think he's still a leader. We don't hear so much about them anymore. And Schlein, right, and the PD and some other groups did not form a coalition. So she also is not, she looks reasonable in comparison to Salvini, and she's not branded successfully by the left as extreme.
Yeah.
So that she can call herself centrodestra. I mean, she just calls herself the center-right.
Which is also happening in other European countries,
Absolutely.
right? To call something center-right.
Absolutely.
When there's still collaborations with what people would say radical or extreme right parties.
And also I think what she did here, and we saw that, so I think she said destra nueva, right? So the idea like we're a new right. So it's a kind
moderna. She said destra moderna.
I can like a kind of dog whistle still to, I am going to tell you what she said, right? I'm going to tell you to be proud, to be right. We're the civil right. We're the respectable right.
Yeah.
We're the, So I think this is still a dog whistle. You could take this as a dog whistle, or you could take this as a dog whistle. What I mean is, I actually show you that it's okay to have these more extreme positions, or you could say she's really modernizing the right? It depends on how you read that. I would see it a little bit as a dog whistle. I think she knows exactly what she's doing, but like that makes her a very effective politician.
Rosa, I see you frowning. What are your thoughts on this?
That's just me thinking. But,
where are your thoughts?
Well, I was thinking I'm not a scientist. I'm not a political scientist.
Yeah, so what have you seen in your correspondence?
I think it's easy to overestimate the level to which Italian politicians in general, and Giorgia Meloni specifically, are ideologically consistent. And I understand that for political scientists, it's important to kind of assume they are, but I think a very big element of Italian politics is, you can either call it pragmatism or opportunism. I think not everything has been thought through thoroughly all the time. I also think that the fragment we saw where she's like making this kind of provocation about, the silly left-wing journalist that is seeing fascists everywhere, is also part of this very long. Remember that Giorgia Meloni was born in Garbatella in Rome, in a kind of left-wing neighborhood, and her character, I think, is going against the grain. So she became right-wing. I mean, I'm simplifying, but I think this is part of it. And she grew up in a time that was, of course, still very heated, where still there was political violence from the left to the right, from the right to the left. So these kind of things, I think, form the way people think, the way a social group forms itself, and I think that's what you're seeing here. That this kind of opposition. It's also kind of making it's like a social gathering, right? And I think this might be one of the reasons why it doesn't work as well in another
Spain.
country. Yeah.
Or would this work in the Netherlands?
If Giorgia Meloni would do it.
Well, if a politician would even give a speech like this.
Not as well, I guess, because I think there's a different dynamic, and I think the whole fascism question it's very complicated. You can write a book about it. You can write a library about it. I didn't do that. There is something in my book. I'm just going to mention it once. But actually, I went to Predappio, which is the birthplace of Benito Mussolini. And this is kind of like you could call it the Disneyland for fascists, or a place of pilgrimage or whatever. And what you see there is, of course, very right-wing people generally that visit Mussolini's tomb. But even there is a social side to it. There is like a Saturday morning, people visiting this tomb and then going to lunch together. As absurd as that might sound to Italians and to Dutch people, doesn't matter. So I think, I think it's the question of fascism is very, very complicated, and as a journalist, I don't always find it very clarifying. For example, there's also the label post-fascist, which has been used a lot. I don't really know what that means, other than that it comes after fascism, but everything basically comes after fascism. I mean, of course. And I don't particularly like it when it's been used as kind of a way to badmouth Giorgia Meloni. Like, oh, she's a fascist, like, we don't have to deal with...
It's kind of this warning, right, that people might use, like, watch out, she's, well, I don't know what they're afraid of, but this can relate to fascism, maybe.
But I would argue it's more effective and more instructive to warn, to be more specific.
Right.
What would you like to warn about? Because I think you pointed out rightly that if you watch the policies that she's proposing, or that she was proposing, they're pretty similar to Geert Wilders or Marine Le Pen or many other people. And I mean, I'm fine with calling them all fascists or not, but I think it's more, it's more useful to actually point out what they're doing and why you think that's not a good idea, if you think that.
Let's watch another fragment where she kind of dive into a little bit, or understand a little bit more of what her sort of ideology or her thoughts on Italy are coming from. This is a speech she gave in 2024. There's this centrodestra. There she says it again, center-right. Caterina, what does it tell us when she's telling about this whole Italian history of the highs and lows, and we've always persisted, and we've always came through this feeling of, to me, it's kind of this nostalgic feeling.
I mean, that's not particular only to Italy, although Italy has also culturally, right? It's of course a country of an extremely rich culture. I also thought always that Italians, sorry, small anecdote, but that Italians were a little bit over the top about like their food. Now I live in Spain and I'm like, oh my God, where's the Italian food? But anyway, so and my husband actually, who's Spanish, agrees with that too. So there are things to really, like you don't change a good Italian pasta by putting something new in it. So i.e. it's a country that likes traditions. It's so it has that particularly, but just, to come back to not food, but well, actually, there's also work on food and how they use the food as a way to preserve culture. But it is, I think, a quite normal thing that you find in radical right. So I'm just using now the word radical right rhetoric. That is, make Italy great again. Yeah. Make America great again. Make
and what she says, we'll see this later, make the West great again.
Exactly, right? So there is this idea that there was something lost and you need a messiah, like a mythical person. She's also a person who really likes Lord of the Rings, the book. So she's Frodo, kind of, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Frodo, who is basically protecting Italy from possible invasions from outside. And then we can think of the usual others that are being picked, which would be the migrant, which was queer people. Initially was also the EU, although we will talk about that later. She switched. You know, so this is a construction of an insider group by redefining that insider group as being native to that land and being connected to the land, the flag, the food, the whatever, and by the same token, defining an outside group that needs to be attacked. And that is also part, unfortunately, of being a good, skilled politician, in that you have a narrative that has a hero and some enemy that needs to be protected. So she does really playbook radical right rhetorical strategy and then we can talk about it. What she does in terms of policy is actually what I think I very much agree with what was said before by Roos as well, and also what was said before about thinking that, you know, how she links up to previous forms. What she does to policy might be a different element. But I think what she does rhetorically is this, and she does this without a doubt very skillful.
I think your panelists agree that this is a quite skilled. Do you want to add something to that, to the way that she's linking this historical narrative to her?
Well, I think she's. I mean, what's just been said, I can agree with a lot of what's been said. She's obviously an extremely skillful politician, and extremely, she knows how to narrate. I mean, this is clear. She knows how to narrate. I mean, maybe returning back to some of the themes we've been talking about. I mean, one of the things when we looked at her for that first thing when she was, you know, laughing at the people that were wearing the black shirts. I mean, the reason I think that plays as well. It's also about narration. It's this idea about victims, right? There's this whole victimhood that they've been excluded, right? So this is why it plays really, and this is what I mean as well about memory and reworking history. We've been excluded, we're victimized, and we're
claiming.
We want to. I mean, it's you know, in some perverse way, it's, you know, like about the debates we have about slavery and these kinds of things. They really, in that kind of a weird way, it's about remaking history so that you bring this stream that's been excluded from the Republic back into the mainstream, right? I mean, because I mean, I totally agree as well. I mean, what if you look at her policies now, and I agree with you what you said, Katarina. I mean, that's one of the things with fascism. It gets thrown around, and we talk. I mean, you know, fascism. What does it really mean?
Can you make this concrete then? Because we're talking about policies. Is there like a specific kind of policy on which she's gone through the whole government that really kind of illustrates how radical or how far right she is?
Well, I mean, if you look at her policies, she's a combination of radical right and conservative. And if you look at, as Katarina said, I mean, you're talking about nativism. Well, we would, you know, you could spin it out in her policy on asylum, right? And these kinds of things are a nativist policy. But as well, we know she's also done things where she's legalized, you know, she's done whole kinds of legalizations things. So I mean, her policies are textbook in some sense nativist and authoritarian. I mean, we talk about later what, you know, if there is a threat to democracy, what she's done about protests and these kinds of things, and you know, and her traditionalism is a form of authoritarianism in the sense that we use it in the literature of the radical right. I mean, in terms of, you know, LGBT and traditional families in this kind of a way. So yeah, it's clear that she is a radical right, pragmatist, conservative politician. But I mean, again, she's the one who keeps bringing it up, right? I mean, people, I think, in some sense, the left is not. I mean, because politics in Italy is very politicized or polarized in the sense polarized between the left and the right. And the left is sometimes, you know, they're not very clever. I mean, they just call fascism wherever they can see it, right? But she also brings it up. I mean, why is she then saying, let's honor Giorgia Meloni? I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, you know, she's bringing it up herself, right?
She's triggering them.
She's triggering it, and that's not even a dog whistle.
I think that
it's a pure statement.
But I think that's a good point. I mean, there is also part in almost trolling them. I think there is, and I think you made a very good point that being the underdog is part of her
the
identity.
whole thing.
And I wanted to add that this fragment is pretty ironic in a way because she's, you know, talking about all this great history and everything, but for most of that history, Italy as the nation that she's always talking about did not exist.
No.
And people were fighting each other. So I think that's a bit of a stretch.
It's a fake history also, or created.
I mean, it's not fake, but
Fake.
No, used in a created, like in a manipulated way. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, I don't find it very convincing. if you know anything about Italy's history.
If we're talking about policies, we were already saying a little bit on protests, of course, and on asylum and on migration. Rosa, when you were there as a correspondent, what's sort of the biggest thing in your eyes that she delivered on, mostly in sort of the promises she made in campaigns and in the coalition that she has?
Yeah, I think migration is a very complicated point because I've worked a lot on migration. I covered a lot of migration stories, and in her campaign, Giorgia Meloni promised a naval blockade on the Mediterranean, something that, of course, we've never heard of after the election, because everyone knows that is not possible, not even practically, let alone morally and everything. I would like to point out that, as Andre also said, she's giving out a lot of workers' visa. She's not advertising this, but she is. And I would also like to point out, because I think it's something that has not been said often enough, that probably one of the most one of the agreements that has led to the most violations of human rights on the Mediterranean has probably been done by the PD, the Partito Democratico, in 2018, if I'm correct, the Memorandum of Understanding with Libya. So that is not to say that Meloni is not anti-migrant, because she is. But I think if you look at very substantial changes, a lot of that is, of course, very hard on a country level in the EU. In general, it's very hard because I've worked a lot with migrants on the ground, and I was always struck by the huge gap between everything that was being discussed on a political level and in the editorial offices of my newspaper and the things I saw on the street and the sea and the island.
Mm-hmm. What is this? How did you notice this gap then?
I mean, these are two realities that don't really touch each other. No. I can give many examples, but I mean, we can think of the migration pact that is the European Migration Pact that is starting
coming up
June 12th. And that's kind of politically presented as this big victory for the EU because now we have everything organized, and that's not going to happen. So I think politicians like to present these kind of solutions for an issue that is very hard to control. And I think Giorgia Meloni is no different. She's very good at the symbolism, and I think what she's actually doing is not just symbolism, because she is kind of changing the discourse on migration within the EU. So all the talking about outsourcing the decisions to the outer borders, even though they're not doing that, it's something that is
to Tunisia and of course
to Albania.
Albania,
it's not working yet, but I think we might be moving there.
Yeah. I think we have to touch upon one more issue that we haven't discussed yet before moving out and discussing probably a little bit more also on this migration pact and her European kind of involvement. And that's, of course, this recent referendum, constitutional referendum that she's had. I think it was in March, which also caught the headlines here. But Andre, maybe you can give us a little bit of more insight. What was happening there? Probably don't have time for the whole constitution of Italy right now. Not like the new Sorrentino film that starts with it. But we have to, in kind of in a bird view, what was happening in this referendum and why is this important?
Okay. That's a small question.
Very small, last question.
Okay. Cut me off if I'm too long. So there was just a referendum on it would have been a change in the constitution, and so basically, long story, it had to go through a referendum in order because it didn't pass through the parliament with sufficient majorities, and it was basically a referendum on the judges, on the judges, and how judges would perform. And the judges in Italy, this is a very controversial issue. You don't have to be left or right to know that the judges in Italy are politicized. I mean, this is a politicized issue that's not new for Giorgia Meloni. And well, the short story is there was a referendum on changing basically how judges, the careers of judges. I mean, one of the issues was how judges, whether they could choose their careers, and another was sort of the way that the overseeing body would observe, or would the commission would, and this became a very politicized issue. And what you're getting at is that this was put forward, the referendum, this legislation, this piece of law was put forward by the Giorgia Meloni government, and it became highly politicized, and it became a vote for or against Meloni.
Yeah.
And Meloni basically lost the no vote, and the opposition won, which is super interesting for many different reasons. We do have to note, though, that then this is how it gets very politicized. People forget that this was actually a Berlusconi initiative. It wasn't a Giorgia Meloni initiative. And then because Berlusconi always had his fights with the judges.
Right.
And Berlusconi wanted to change this, and Berlusconi's party is now disintegrating in some sense, or having difficulties because they lost the referendum. So Meloni brought this issue forward, and so I'm saying this because even though I think that it wouldn't have been, it's good it didn't pass. It would have been not positive, I think. It's not necessarily, as some people interpret it, a return to fascism. That's how it gets framed, and also in Italy, the left would frame it as that as well.
Yeah,
and
like sort of power
I
grab.
completely agree. I saw these kind of comparisons with Hungary and Poland, and I think that doesn't make any sense. And I think you're very right that I was still in Rome at the time, and it became a poll. I mean, I talked about this with a lot of left-wing friends, and it became a poll on the government, and they were voting against.
I mean, so exactly. So she lost the vote.
She lost the vote, and I think the opposition is understandably, I would, if I were them, using that to say, we can win the election next year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's true, because a lot of people now came out just to vote against Meloni, but doesn't mean they're going to vote for the same party.
Because, but as you've been saying before, there's not been a really serious competition for her.
Can I say one?
Yes, of course.
I think it was not only about Meloni. I think it's also about the judiciary having this position in Italy, which is very much associated with being anti-corruption. So that was also a situation where I had phone calls from friends. It was super complicated, right? So this is also, I'm very happy. There were other things involved, and I had to go in Dutch radio once to explain it, and I don't know, I found it very difficult. And I'm a political scientist, I study some of these things. And friends of mine were asking me what they should vote and what I thought, also because the left was giving, also in Italy, was giving this kind of spiel that it would be this more fascist turn. And then they said, but I'm so worried about, like they actually saw the judges as a way, to kind of curb corruption within the Italian system. And they actually thought that she was meddling with the judges on the basis of that, right? Like, so that was the idea, that she was wanting to do that because it was associated with Silvio Berlusconi, right? So also, at least in the folk speak, right? So this was a very complicated referendum. And I think also what we have to remember, if we look at it historically, so there was another very famous prime minister that had a referendum and then associated his own political faith to it, exactly, Renzi, and had to decline. So there has always been, and then I think that goes back to Rosa's point earlier, that there's this, Italians are not in love with their politicians. It is very low trust, to be honest. Actually, she's doing very well still on her own approval rating is higher than Friedrich Merz, Macron, so she's actually doing quite well in that way. But I think it is also where you can express your discontent on something as, not consequential as an election for them. It's like, okay, well, we're going to vote against the government. So she was very clever not to add it to her political future.
But is it still one of the first cracks in her success, or no?
It is, I think, and I think it's interesting that a lot of young people came out to vote against Meloni. And I think the participation in the election is something that always interests me in Italy, because it's pretty low. And I mean, everyone will tell you, if you ask voters, some people will tell you I don't vote. Many people will tell you I will vote, but I'm like doing like this, closing my nose. So that tells you something about the trust in politics.
The kind of the engagement.
Yeah, and I think people are more likely to come out if they can vote against a politician, like in this case.
Instead of voting for something.
Yeah.
I think we have... You can add, because I'm letting you go, so you can add one more thing, Andre, before you
I disagree.
Oh,
yeah,
I disagree.
I disagree.
Okay.
I honestly, really, sorry. I disagree.
Go on.
I don't think that this is the end of Meloni, because I think one thing that
I don't think that was meant. I was saying it's a crack in success.
Yeah, I don't even think so. I mean, it was a temporary crack. I mean, there is some cracks now that are going on, and I think the cracks are in part that you see how she has so many incompetent ministers around her, and this is what happens when you have a new party. But the reason I say I disagree is because I think that one thing that we have to understand is that party systems in countries have structures, and the left-right structure is extremely strong in Italy. And the most important story in the last 25 years in Italy is the search for a center-right party. And Berlusconi filled that for a while. He disappeared, and that's what's going on now. So there's a search for a center-right party.
Yeah.
Bossi came up for a while, but he was, like you said, just too crazy. In political science, official term. But I mean, he just couldn't do it. But Meloni has filled this gap, right?
Yeah.
And so even though people will not vote, as it is in any country, in the Netherlands, it's the same thing. You either choose to vote for the right or you don't vote, right? It's not like you're going to go vote for the left. If you're center-right, you're not going to vote for the left.
You're not going to vote for the left, but you can now vote for Vanacci, for example, if you want to go more right-wing. Yeah, I mean, she's been overtaken on the right.
Thank you for your last comment, Andre. Give him a warm applause. Because we're changing you for Donatello Piras. You can come to the stage and also give him a warm applause, please. Let me further introduce you. Donatello Piras is a Dutch-Italian presenter, journalist, communications expert, very much specialized in Italy and European politics. You might have heard him on the radio, BNR, NOS, RTL, where he provides commentary on Italy and current political developments, but he's also very much known as a co-host of the podcast Italy podcast, a very, very original name, which he created together with Evelina Redmeijer.
Covers pretty much what it is, isn't it?
Glad that you're here. You probably have a lot to say, but first we're going to watch another video clip.
Europa sono un po' preoccupati
This is quite of a clear example of two faces, right? In the beginning, we see here Italy has to leave the European Union. They have to really convince us if they want us to stay. And then in the end, we see her actually kind of, yeah, we're going to stay and we're going to defend our national interests. Donatello, when she started as a prime minister, was she seen as like a legitimate partner in the EU to kind of have relations with, to kind of be in...
Well, I think that in the beginning there was this question mark throughout Europe, asking who is Meloni, what is she going to do? And she was also treated as an anomaly. What will she do? And then she transformed in this, what we saw.
Yeah.
But we have to remind that the first image was 2014.
Yeah,
and
so that's
then
a long time
that
ago.
was a long time ago. I mean, and the first one where she says that Mussolini was great was in 1969, 1996, sorry. So it was a little bit, I mean, people can change through history, and I think that what people saw right now was that, well, her political intelligence combined to what often happens in Italy as well is that they're pretty pragmatic. Also the left politicians, Conte, Renzi, not to mention all the technocrats like Monti and Draghi, they're pragmatic. Do I have to use the European Recovery Fund? Hell yes, I have to have all those billions, and therefore I have to do something with Brussels. Then I have to collaborate with Brussels. Yeah. So that happened. This image is quite nice because she is the first politician that dragged the northern European countries into the how's it called, the Palazzo il Quirinale. So actually the quote of Mark Rutte back then was when Italy had a lot to do with migrants and with asylum seekers, and was bordering itself the coast, was, well, I can't help that the Netherlands is not in the Mediterranean Sea. That was the remark of Mark Rutte back then. And she dragged him over there, and now they...
Like, I mean,
I'm not saying that it's a very effective policy still now, so I agree with, but at least they're combined forces doing. So that's actually also what she's doing.
And that's an effort of Meloni, you're saying?
I think that's partly an effort of Meloni, and I mean, she didn't even make a turn. She is collaborating within the EU. The same day she said, I am against what Russia is doing, and I'm fully cooperating with Ukraine. And there she went. Yeah. So I think the two faces, I agree with Andre, it could have been more, but at least two. And she has a domestic face, and that's pretty much good described by the panel on beforehand. And she has another international face, and that's actually what we have seen right now.
Where she's just looking for collaborations and just defending Italian. And also this from its tradition, I'm hearing from you, of pragmatism that we've seen in Italy throughout the years. So that's in the sense that I'm trying to get clear, nothing new.
Well, if you want to be effective in Europe, I mean, you have to stand up and you have to do something. And I can't name an Italian prime minister before Meloni that wasn't pragmatic. I mean, in rhetoric, maybe Berlusconi was sometimes as stupid as to make stupid jokes about, well, we know about who. But his policy wasn't very different, didn't differ as much as the Meloni government does. Actually, on a lot of economic policies and also migrant policies, they are actually the same. So that didn't change much in the past 20 years.
Yeah. And Rosa, how do you, would you regard this kind of this pragmatism of her also towards the EU that we're focusing on right now? Do you see this as a shift in her kind of ideology, in her narrative, in her kind of what she's thinking, or is it really just led by pragmatism that now she's in seat of power, she has to? Can you look in her head, please?
Yeah, I can't. I wish I could. I don't know. I really don't know. I just think it's interesting that earlier I pointed out that people voted for her also because she was the one that was not in the Draghi government.
Right.
But I think on foreign policy, she copied Draghi's line like one by one, literally. And I think she did that because she also noticed that many people in Italy liked that direction. So yeah, it's definitely pragmatic.
Do we still see anything of her Euroscepticism anywhere, Caterina?
No, so I think she actually also followed the economic line of Draghi. Just to say, I used to be a professor at Bocconi, and the minister in the government, of course, is Bocconiani. Yeah, exactly. So is an alumnus of Bocconi. So Giorgetti. So you see a kind of very line that is much more technocratic on the economic side. But I think not to become too scientific about it. But I think there is you always have this in Italian policy, this idea that you need an external vehicle. That's the definite term also in Italian, to be able to reform Italy. So it doesn't come from inside because it's so chaotic and so on. So you need pressure from outside. And I think that the pressure on the debt of Italy and the fact that she said when she was in 2014, oh, we'll leave the euro. Well, and we saw Brexit and we saw everything that happened. That is just not an option. So this kind of, let's say, disciplining force of a market in the way that you see Donald Trump actually only reacting to the stock market, it seems, right, is also a little bit what with Meloni. So I don't know if Meloni would have been a politician, not in Italy, but let's say in the Netherlands, where there's more fiscal space, actually, where you could do more, quote unquote, crazy things on the economy, that she would have been different. So that's, I think, one part of it, that she's less Eurosceptic because she's in government, right? So she has to deal with these things. And then the other element is that she understood something that is, again, makes her very clever as a politician. And that, I think, is even beyond Draghi, which is that she understood that she's at the center of the Mediterranean. So what she's doing now, also talking to Qatar, talking to Libya, talking to, all this, she makes herself the Harris of the Mediterranean, something that France used to do. As we know, the only hiccups she's had in her career are with Macron, basically, or with the French president. And she's trying to see that. She sees his weakness, and I think she's really doing that. And you see that in the Italian newspapers, that's also... And it actually fits, when we go back to the previous panel, this idea of the empire. So it's definitely true, Italy didn't exist in its current form, but there was the Roman Empire where, a lot of, links, of course, are there and in Rome. So she has a very good, clever way of redefining that.
Or maybe recentering Italy.
Exactly, in that space. And it allows her to seem competent. So it's this thing that she's been, so one of my very good friends in Italy always says that she's from Rome, and she has this idea that Meloni wants to be the best girl in the class. So she speaks languages, she learns, she does this thing. She's understood this, so she wants to also be a good prime minister. I think that's really what she wants to do. And she understood that having this Mediterranean thing, using the EU, using her relationship with Ursula von der Leyen, is a very successful way of displaying competence at home. And it also fits her ideology, because she has, what is consistent since 2014 is that she's for advocating national interest in the EU.
Yeah, that's what she continues.
What she says she does.
Yeah.
And she also successfully actually collaborated with the biggest party, the EPP, the European People's Party, within the biggest and the most influential party within the European Party. And there she had influence, despite not being part of that, because she neglected that fact that she remained in her own other more national right wing, I like the description, edge. But she actually had influence by talking to them and by saying, well, if you want our votes, you have to do something about, well, there it goes, migration. Yeah. There's this particular part, if you allow me, Christina, that recalled me that remember the video about Meloni saying about, and now we are una destra moderna.
Yeah. Una destra vincente.
Yes, and that's what they don't like. The first comparison was that it remembered me of the MAGA movement in 2016, but it remembered me also of the name of the party. It's called Fratelli d'Italia, and that is not by coincidence also the name of the Italian national anthem. The second strophe, and I wrote it down because, I never sing the second strophe. It goes, noi siamo da secoli calpesti, derisi perché non siamo popolo, perché siamo divisi. So, translation, for centuries we have been trampled on and mocked because we are not one people, because we are divided. That is actually the same narrative that she did, and she can say a lot about Meloni, but her rhetoric is pretty much well,
continuous.
Well, yes, and she's on it, and that's actually also a comparison that she's made. Whenever there's division, and I agree that the comparison that she made about the Roman Empire and then there came the barbarians, and I mean, it was a little bit hustling the history, but the message was, I will bring it together. Yeah. That is what she's doing, and that's what they like, especially if you have a conservative audience.
Who's they?
The conservative audience, the electorate. And we have not to forget, because yes, we mentioned the Lega Nord, but let's not forget that the second party within the coalition is the Forza Italia of the
Berlusconi.
Yeah, of the late Berlusconi. So, and that's the only reason why she can call herself center right, because there's not a large center in Salvini. But there is a little bit of center in the Forza Italia party. So that's her...
Left, a little bit left.
Yeah, but I mean, that's her alibi to call it center-right.
And you were saying, this kind of reminded me of like the rise of 2016 MAGA, Make America Great Again. Why was this?
Because I don't know if we all remember, but because I think that in Europe everybody was completely, oh God, I mean it should have been Hillary Clinton, everybody thought, and now it was Donald Trump. And in the weeks after that, a lot of inhabitants, a lot of people, MAGA people, but also right-wing people in the United States, wrote letters, and a lot of newspapers published those letters, and that was the Budweiser people in the Midwest. And for ages and for years we have been neglected and put aside by the elites and now it's our turn. That also is a little bit the rhetoric that we saw from Meloni. Oh, they were used to just put us in the corner, and now we're back on the center, and we are winning, so we are a successful right wing. And I mean, you've heard them cheer and cry. That's actually what that particular part of Italy likes a lot. And let me emphasize that particular part, because we have not to forget that a lot of Italians, more than 50%, hate that. That's also true.
Yeah.
That's also true.
And still she is the biggest and most stable.
Well, she's the biggest because there's no alternative. That's the only thing that happens also with Berlusconi.
But I think there also the non-electors come into play, because if you're thinking of numbers, I mean, I'm not going to do all the calculations, but you have like in the last election about 60% of Italians went to vote. And about,
is it high for Italy or low?
It's 60%? Pretty low. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think about 30% voted for, a bit less, voted for Giorgia Meloni of those 60. So, I mean, of course she won, but remember that it's a coalition system and it's not like everyone in Italy likes Meloni. She's like the...
But the real problem is that with those numbers, and I think you're pretty correct on those, so what is the alternative? The alternative is the Partito Democratico.
Yeah.
They had 21% or something of those 60%. So the alternative, even now in 2027, what is that? Il Campo Largo. It barely exists. It's Eli Schlein, it's Conte. Who do we have to vote for?
No, absolutely.
But her personal approval rating is still 45%.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I know to say that, like, we think, 45% is not a majority, but like Europe, this is like super high.
We were trying to kind of sketch this image of her on an international level, right? How is she perceived? She's seen as this, as we've been discussing in the European Union, as this collaborator, somebody who is like putting the people together, getting it done, in a sort of way. And we also still have to see it, of course, for it to be true. But I'm wondering, Katarina, do you see any other comparisons? There's a short comparison to this MAGA narrative, but maybe there's closer to home kind of comparisons that you're seeing between her. Rightfully so, we're saying, no, we should not compare her policies to like Hungary or Poland. But are there things that you would like to compare to, or people will...
Yeah. So I mean, one
open question. I don't know if you see.
One thing I wanted to say a little bit like about this pragmatism and how you bring people together. Italy's having a little bit of a moment because the two big reports that were, one is by my boss, which is Enrico Letta, the other one is by Mario Draghi, right? So the big things at the European level are run through Italians at the moment. Well, I think Letta actually, because the one Europe One Market thing comes out of the Letta reports, right? So I think that is, it's like diplomatically at the European level, there's a lot of ideas coming out of Italy. Also informally, if you talk to people at the Commission, for example, they say if you have an issue that needs to be solved, there's two nationalities to ask. First, the Italians. If you cannot get the Italian to solve it, you ask the Belgian, right? So they do not ask Dutch people. Well, because we are not known to be. We have an idea.
Something about diplomacy.
Exactly. We have an idea. We're very but we're very diplomatic. But we see our upper diplomats leading a big organization at the moment, the NATO. Maybe not necessarily perceived as putting that all together, right? So this is a small side note. But so she also wins by that. Right, so what I mean is Italy's having a little bit of a moment in the ideas, and that is also associated in some ways with that, which probably is not associated to her, but like. At least I don't think Draghi got.
But that's basically so the momentum that's created around her.
Exactly, and I think that works. So that's one, and then on the other aspect, on the comparisons. So I think on Euroscepticism, there's two types. What you had. So the one was exit Euroscepticism. So we leave, right? So and Brexit kind of put a little bit of a dent to that Euroscepticism because it was perceived as not a success. Then the other form of Euroscepticism is reform Euroscepticism. So you reform the European Union into something, and you do that from the inside out rather than from the outside. And she's an exponent of that. The question there is exactly the same question we asked in the previous panel. So how will she develop if you have a directly elected far-right president in France, if you would have a far-right chancellor in Germany? Would she start to do more of that nationalistic, which she's been consistent on? Yeah. Or would she be more pragmatic? Now it is opportune for her, because she's pragmatic, to be this way. But it doesn't need to be that way. She could have, she did distance herself from Orban, but not always, right? So there are some things that right? So the question is a little bit, what will she do when the European playing field in the Council, where all the heads of state sit together and do the long-term development of the European Union, will she play with the European People's Party, or would she go and cooperate with more, radical right leaders that would be elected and then move forward? I don't know.
What do you think, Rosa? Again, can you look
I don't know,
but
I think it's a good point. It comes back to the point about consistency. Really? Don't overestimate her consistency. And I think you also made a very good point about diplomacy. I think it's not a side note. It's easy to see it as a side note, but I think in general, Italian diplomacy is quite strong. This is what all my diplomat friends tell me. But I think also Giorgia Meloni, you have to credit her on that she's very strong. This may seem trivial, but I don't think it is. She's very strong on the relationships. And I saw that when Margrethe came to Rome, of course, they had this famous kind of friendship. What was it? Yeah, it was very clumsy. But I think they really liked each other. And I think that is important. And I think it's also not a coincidence that she, as a woman in a party that's, of course, dominated by men, in a country that's dominated by men, she's the leader. I think that says something about your political skill, and that is.
And also in a way, so her diplomatic skill.
Yeah, I think that's part of the political skill set, and she knows how to connect to people. And these can be people from quite different political colors. Yeah. I mean, just on a human level, she's very good at that.
I'm hearing a lot of praise now all of a sudden. I
mean, I'm observing. I think she's also rhetorically, she's very strong. That doesn't mean you have to like her, but...
Katarina, you want to add something to that?
So I think it's really important, and that's also important because, as a political scientist, I don't have a stake. I mean, the only thing that what we talk about is that more radical parties can be more problematic because they're radical. So, like they could undermine some things, and we've seen much more success, just as an illustration, right? In 1985, we had about 3.5% on average in Western Europe support for the radical right. That's now an average 20. Well, that's higher in Italy. It's higher in this country, right? It's about a third. So the big successful parties on the radical kind have been on the right. She's been a particular successful politician within that. But that doesn't mean that, like, so we can talk about the skills of her as a politician, but we can still need to talk about the fact that what we just talked about, which is certain policies we're activating. So what she's done in the EU, just to kind of illustrate, so just for your comment to praise, but she has mainstreamed ideas in the European Union that were perceived as extremely radical.
And those are either on migration, right?
Exactly, right? So the idea that, so there's a lot of things that are difficult in the European Union. We don't have to go into immigration policy and, like, you know, the doubling, i.e. where you enter the European Union, you need to be processed, which is extremely difficult for Greece, Italy, and Spain, because they have this geography, so it's really difficult. So I understand that many Spanish, actually, she finds Sanchez on this, who is a left-wing politician, because they feel the pressure. But this idea of the hubs, right, which are not very successful, the hubs she developed in Albania was expensive and is not working, as far as I understand. I'm not an expert, but like and it's very symbolic politics, right? So it's like, I am able to, like, you know, not have the Navy fleet, as you were saying, but I can do. So you are right that, you know, like, it's praise in terms of she's been extremely good at doing that. But by doing that, you could almost think it's like she's masking some of the fact that she's actually been successful on mainstreaming her policy ideas, which by, you know, many human rights lawyers, many, you know, are very, very much criticized. And are also from effectiveness, you could criticize them. They're not the most effective policies we know to deal with the issue. So, you know, I do see your point. I just wanted to raise it.
No, I like this.
You know, like that there are also things to be a bit worried about.
Donatella, a quick comment, and then we're going to watch another clip.
Yeah, I mean, I finally found someone that I disagree with, so that's good in a panel, is it? Because I fully agree, but the only part that I disagree is it's only symbolic politics. But I don't think that's true, because I mean, the hubs were one of the things that were established. They're not working.
She's also doing like a bonus in euros for lawyers who are getting people to voluntarily.
I mean,
leave.
there's a lot of policy made by that, and things are not working. I fully agree on that one, but it's not just symbolic. I mean, I think that a lot of Italian prime ministers prior to her talked a lot and did less about that. At least she tries to do. She goes bilaterally also to northern African countries and tries to make deals. Some work, a lot don't. I mean, we have to be very frank on that, because she got a lot of critics about that. And I think that critics from NGOs and human rights and civil rights organizations are partly true, I'm afraid. But it's not symbolic. She at least tries on those policies to really achieve something. We have to see whether she succeeds. That's the point that I agree on with you again.
We're going to watch a final clip where we see sort of a different Meloni as we've seen her before in the clips that we've chosen to show you. This is Meloni visiting the White House.
I know that when I speak about Westmania, I don't speak about the geographical space. I speak about the civilization. And I want to make that civilization stronger.
What makes you laugh?
A lot, but well, at least he's frank. I mean, Donald Trump about like, you know, the thing that I remembered from this press conference was that actually first it was this translator and he was translating, and then the translation went completely off, and then she was that irritated that she said, "Okay, leave it," and she went back into English, saying it herself. That was thinking, well. What to say? I mean,
do we see a pragmatic alliance of her with this president of the United States, or is this also an ideological alignment?
Do you think that Italy needs America?
I'm assuming yes.
Hell yes. Do we need it economically for export, for import? I mean, yes. So I mean, on all the tariffs, there are a lot of Italian products that were very badly harmed about that. So she was also doing the national. We don't have to forget.
Interest.
Yes, of course she was doing that. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, we have seen the other already mentioned Dutch diplomat, also known as Mark Rutte, and his diplomacy in the White House. I think this was just a little bit of that. Yes, I mean, she was talking towards the mouth of Donald Trump. Yes, that's what's happening.
Rosa?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this is kind of outdated, as I'm sure you all know, because they ran into a little hiccup last month about a pope. Yeah.
What's happening here for people who missed it? I don't think anyone in this room.
I don't think this particular image was the problem, but the fact that a pope was talking about peace was very offensive to Donald Trump.
Yeah, and then Donald Trump said something about the Pope being weak.
Weak on crime. Yeah. Famously high crime rates in Vatican City. And and what did he say? Oh, that he was a radical leftist, or he was catering to the radical left, and he was terrible on foreign policy.
Wasn't this like a gift for Meloni to kind of distance herself from this?
I mean,
from this,
or not,
or not.
I think she made. She always makes a political calculation, and she did that in a very moment, and she sided with the Pope.
Yes, she didn't denounce Trump.
She said it was unacceptable, and that she didn't want to live in a world where religious leaders were dictated by political leaders, or something along that line. And then Trump said she was unacceptable herself. So that, but I'm sure they will
be friends
reunite
again soon. Yeah. Caterina?
No, so the Vatican has a very important position politically also in Italy, right? So there is, of course, officially a separation between church and state, but it's very difficult to study the Vatican, right, as a political scientist, but we know it has influence. So especially for the right, she cannot say anything against the Pope. I mean, that's basically like a done deal. So that is something that Donald Trump also didn't fully understand, I guess, about Italian politics.
This is cultural sensitivity.
Well, but also religious. I mean, this is really important in
Catholic,
many ways.
I mean,
exactly, Catholicism, and that's really, and it's the Holy Father, and it's like, and she would, So I think that's a really important element, especially for a social conservative politician. But the thing that you also have in Italian society is latent worries about NATO, the US, militarization. So this is also why I said with the fascism, that this is also something that's just not very popular, and that is more on the left, but it's also on the right. And so I think this entire fact that Donald Trump started the war in Iran without asking allies, that made her then say you cannot use the base in, at least the one in Sicily, I don't know the other ones, to tank, as far as I understand, they had to tank the planes.
And she couldn't do that because of the constitution first, and secondly, because they didn't obey the times. I mean, should they have asked it a week before, the Italians might have said yes, but they asked it 24 hours. And then they had to say no.
So what you hear is, I don't know if that's true, that it has happened without Italy being in officially a war. So the constitutional thing has been kind of looked through, that there have been black flights. I mean, but those are also in Germany. I mean, we know that, right? It's just the alliance. But here you had a situation in which alliance members of NATO were not told by the United States that they would attack on that date. And so this became a very difficult element, where you then get that Meloni was one of the first European prime ministers to go and stand behind Sanchez and say, who on more principled grounds had made this position, right?
Yeah.
So, which is very odd. Those are allies.
Then followed by Friedrich Merz. I mean, and then subsequently.
Exactly. So in that way, I think this is
Did it surprise you?
Well, there is an internal. So, like, if you think there is a radical right international, right? Like, so there is these links where we know that,
and they meet
Steve
up.
Bannon had links in in Rome. There's like through Hungary, through CPAC, this Conservative Action Committee where she spoke a lot in the US. So there's been clearly, links politically. Vance has come. She's also seen Rubio, whatever. So she has these connections and she's used them. That there isn't fundamental kind of weaving error in that international, which is that make Italy great again might not be the same as make the US great again. So in this case, Donald Trump decides that this is in the interest of the United States, which is also very controversial in the MAGA base, because he was also this kind of more anti. So here you see these nationalisms, let's say, or the national interest colliding, and she needs to take a step back, but she also needs the US. So it's that's what I mean. It's not easy for her either, and she's has navigated. I'm sorry to say, again, she's navigated this so far,
and it has taken already a couple of days before she reacted on that one.
So, and that is so. I think that for me, what it says. So this is just coming back to what you're saying. We should not. I think it's important not to take away from this panel that it's like a glowing thing, but she has a very good political instinct.
Or that she has someone next to her.
Nah, for what you hear, I mean, through the grapevine,
it's her.
That she, well, the thing is that, so the story goes, but this is of course by people who who say things, I don't know if this is all correct, right? And I don't know if Rosa heard this, that she was a junior minister under Berlusconi.
For youth?
Exactly. So she's been trained and observed. She was political, extremely young, which was said, and I think by both of you. So she's a real political animal. And she's a talent that came out of that time. She sees her time. She knows it. And I think coming back to my, let's say, theory of her, she wants to be successful and she wants to have a second term. And the second term issue among Italian watchers that are political scientists is also what makes them ponder, because it would be unheard of, right? It will really be post, when was the last time, 57? I can't remember where, because Berlusconi got two, but didn't get them back to back.
No,
right?
And also not full.
So if she gets back to back to in a country where the bureaucracy is very strong, she would then become the worst thing to be.
Like a pioneer.
Exactly, that would be extremely, so she would be very
as
powerful.
a woman in a country where the masculine factor is maybe a little bit above the average, if we see it within the European Union.
We might have that in other countries now, apparently, as well. But I don't know. But exactly, no. But I mean, let's say where we know that there is not as high female participation than, let's say, in a country like France, right? I mean, because the Netherlands has high female participation, but that's more part-time, so we don't know how that is in the Netherlands. But let's say it's not Sweden when it comes to gender rights, right? So in that way...
But also on I think also the case you're making is on stability, right? The continuity that we see in Italian governments.
But that's what she said. We're going to be the respectable right. We're going to be this is the idea that this is her project.
Her power base in Europe, will she get a second mandate, will be even bigger, because then if her national mandate is given, that means a lot in Brussels. We have seen that also with Mark Rutte back again. Then Italy will gain even more on the international platform.
And she will become one of the more experienced leaders in Europe. Yeah.
We're going to open this discussion up, of course, to questions from the audience, but not before I give a small comment to Andre, because I feel like you cannot get a hold of yourself.
Exactly.
Please stand up.
It's like too much praise.
It's okay. I just wanted to add one more thing. I think it's a super interesting conversation, but I think something that I'm missing that I think is super important. So I completely agree with Katerina, what she was saying, talking about basically Meloni's desire it's a middle power, right? Their desire to be respected, especially in the Mediterranean. And then you get the whole thing with NATO and all that, in the American alliance. But in some sense, also something that's been going on in Italy for the last while is pacifism and opposition to the war. And when I was there last October, there were millions of people on the street. And this is where the Catholic Church plays a big role, because unlike in the Netherlands, you don't have to be left or right. You can just be opposed to the war. And this is especially super high among young people, which is really interesting after the referendum, where young people actually came out and voted. So I think what's also really interesting is, in some sense, the break with Trump Trump really helped her here, because she all of a sudden got freed, and she's become very aggressive in anti-Israel. I mean, relatively aggressive anti-Israel, and even supporting the flotilla and this kind of stuff. So this is something that's super important, that I think, for domestic politics and for the elections. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're doing it. That's right. Yeah. We are with all your mics here at the party, so we don't have enough. Yeah. Let's go there.
I try to keep myself updated, so I read the news from time to time. And what I've been reading lately is that Italy is facing major economic problems, mainly due to rapid declining birth rates. I was wondering how can the economic policy of Meloni be characterized?
What is the economic policy of Giorgia? I mean, I don't want to be mean, but I think that is the question, right? So it's stability again, right? But she hasn't done any big reform.
We don't know yet, you're saying.
No. It's really Berlusconi all over again. Like, it's basically, it's basically, if you would look at it, it's just no reforms. She does the bare minimum. She, yeah. That's also the. I mean, that's also the.
If you want.
Yeah, and the problem there is I think the challenges that Italy faces, the only way to solve it is reforms on the labor market, on educational, wages, tax reforms. That is what all the governments have been lacking in the past 2 decades. So that's the first problem. On birth rates, I've made a podcast episode about, is there somewhere in the world a governmental policy that helps the birth rate? And the answer was no. Unless some scientist will now raise his hand and say, or her hand. So I don't think that she can do a lot about, let's say, the birth rate itself, unless she will reform the country and give more money and give Italians the opportunity not to come to Amsterdam or London or Geneva to earn a normal wage, but that you can earn it in Italy itself, also in the south. So I think that's what governments have to do. That's what they all keep promising in the election, in the campaigns. It's what never happens. So that's the problem.
I think we're gonna. Do you want to? Well, yeah, we're gonna continue to a next question. I don't remember everyone's hand. Okay, we'll do one in the back and then to you.
Hi. About the masculinity and femininity story, because my name is Giorgia. Yeah, your parents chose this name for you. I'm a woman. Well, that's a DNA thing. I am a Christian. Yeah, you happen to be born in a country which is Christian. I even had doubts that he might have chosen whether to become mother or not, because we know that their sentimental history is not really, as plain and normal. What kind of woman is she? Is she really for the feminine part? I mean, she presents herself as somebody who is proud of being who she is because she is what she is, but not for what she has achieved for her CV. She presented herself as, this is my name, this is my gender, this is my religion. Is that it? Is that a female icon?
Like a feminist icon or a female icon? Can I ask for a specification of your question?
I cannot associate her to feminism. It's impossible for me. So do of it whatever you like.
Okay, thank you. Do you have someone in mind that you want to answer from? Catharina?
No, I mean, it's a very good question. So in the book, sorry, I'm plugging now also my own book, but in the Symphony van Onvrede, I report on a study that we did about Xylella, which was it affected Puglia, so one of the regions, and there were olive trees that were dying. I will come to the olive trees that were dying, and we looked at the effects of that and what that did to the region, etc. And we did also ethnographic work. What does ethnographic work mean? You go to these places, you talk to people, you see how it is. And we were talking to a woman in a small village, and I don't say the name because we signed this is research, so we signed it to be anonymous for her, stay anonymous, who was saying about how everything was, this left behind place and nothing was there. The only actually shining building in that place was the headquarters of Fratelli Italia, right, with the tree. And this woman was saying, I vote. So we said, who did you vote for? Of course, I voted for Giorgia Meloni. And it was also for change and protest, what Rosa was saying. But then she said, she is a tough woman, and she's the only one who can deal with these, and I'm not going to say the bad word she used, males that are in Rome. And the interesting element to that was this person was clearly right-wing, right, in some ways, or more conservative, socially conservative, but she also liked this ballsiness of Meloni. Because I agree with you very much. There's nothing in what she does, actually what she does in rhetoric and what she's done in policy is not in favor of gender equality at all, right? But she has still this image. She was the first prime minister that took her child to the inauguration. You know, so it's like you know, there's some ambiguous things.
Attention.
Some people,
I don't completely agree in the sense that
you're harsher than me.
Well, no. I think of course having policies to improve gender equality. No, she doesn't. But the fact that she's there as a woman is something. Yeah. So I think she is doing something, and I think it's a shame that in this country it has never happened, for example. So, I mean, we can be very smug, but I think it's also interesting. This is something I've been thinking about. I don't have the answer. Why is it that it seems to be easier on the right than on the left?
There's research on that.
Okay, you can.
So very short. So there's research on the fact
short.
So basically,
It's a self-steering paddle. Yeah.
Females who are advocating on the left are usually advocating for gender equality, which is perceived as they want to get ahead. So voters don't see this as a universal policy that helps them, but as kind of you're the labor union of your group. And on the right, well, that's not what she can, because it's not necessarily associated with. So she must then be very good, you know, like the idea that you would. So it's perceived as more general, and secondly, if you move up in the right, which is not always so positive towards women in certain countries, you must be very good. And so, this is what voters think. I'm not saying that this is but this is kind of research.
That's what the research is saying.
Yeah.
We're going to go to another question. You.
Thank you. I would like to ask you to expand a little bit more about the relationship between Meloni and Draghi, because Draghi has been very, very important for her in several ways. She was not joining his government, but she was supporting him from outside. She had the freedom of doing things one way or the other, but she chose to follow Draghi, which was very important. Besides, Draghi sort of gave her, I would say, lessons in how to be a prime minister. She was following him in the last months of his government, and she was learning how to be prime minister. This is my conviction. At the Cerimonia della Campanella, when the prime minister passes, is in the Netherlands, it's the keys of the torrent. In Italian, is a small bell. They were standing there, speeches, and then Draghi passed to her the bell, and then she said, and then he went away, and she turned to him and he said, "Che fai? Me lasci sola."
What are you doing?
What are you doing? You're leaving me alone now here. So I would like you to expand a little bit more on the relationship, and I think maybe André is the one who could respond on that.
Yeah, you were.
Oh my God, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I would have a little. I mean, it's interesting what you say. I would almost. I mean, I think I would. I don't know. I mean, I don't really. Correct me. I don't really see it in the same way. I mean, I see her opposition was more at that time was more anti-Draghi. But if you mean that Draghi was kind of a model for her, is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, I have to say he
endorsed her.
He endorsed her.
And I fully agree actually on this on this lecture, because in the passing of La Campanella, I mean, you have to see it back on YouTube. Look at the looks in both faces that they had.
Very proud.
There was, I mean, I have seen this for decades. And there has never been a sign of love between two people that gave each other the power. It was more like the ceremony and then to hell with you and then I will go. And there was kind of a...
a father.
Yes, and actually she admitted in a couple of interviews as well that they had not one, not two, but a couple of meetings also about back to the European Recovery Fund and the billions that were there. So she had to cope with the deadlines of Brussels because otherwise Italy would have been lost. And Draghi was very much on those deadlines. So I think that there was an endorsement in this matter. And I think that speaking about the opposition that she did was also the talented politician Meloni choosing to oppose the technocratic government that was there, and all the Italians that I spoke on the right said, and now, and remember that in the summer that I was prior to the election, in the election campaign, so prior to the elections, now finally we can choose a government again. And who did they choose? Giorgia Meloni, because she was the only one without dirty hands. So I think she played it pretty well. So I think that I agreed on this remark, but I mean, maybe you have some time now, so.
No.
Just let me sort of add one thing. So I think...
So I have to intervene time-wise.
Okay.
Because I said it was going to be 90 minutes, and we're definitely exceeding 90 minutes now. You can have a short comment,
okay,
and you can
very
I
short.
think you wanted to add to, and then we have to probably...
So, I mean, I never thought about what you just said. I have to think more about that. I think your answer is very interesting. But you bring up another very interesting point, which we haven't talked about, and that's populism, right? But my argument would be along what you're saying, I think, which is very interesting, is how Meloni interacts with the institutions is not populist a lot of the time. When she was in opposition, it was. But what she here does is what you're saying. She likes to present herself, well, and she presents herself as a credible statesman, right? And she uses the state for her purpose, which is something different than a populist does, well, Wilders or even a Salvini. So I have to think more of what you said, but this is really interesting that she used it in opposition, but she didn't just come in as an anti-Draghi. And her relationship with people like Mattarella, which is tension-filled, but also interesting, right? It's different than the relationship between Salvini and Mattarella, for example, which is, so that's a super interesting comment, yeah.
No, I wanted to say two things. One, that Draghi restructured quite a lot of debt in terms of changing the length of it. It's right before her that's really benefiting her, and I think she understood that economically, I mean, he's very sharp mind when it comes to these things, so that's one, right? And also an academically trained economist. And then the other element I think that is there is that many Italian prime ministers are quite technocratic, right? So there is something in this, there is this populism in elections and then technocracy in government, right? And I think in some ways, parts of that you saw in her too, which is this thing that we're discussing, like, is this strategic? Is this really a change of heart? And I think that's really the case. So yes, I mean, I think there might even be a liking between the two of them. I mean, that they meet more and so on. I don't know that, but it seems when they talk in both in interviews, it seems to be like that. And I think she understands that if she wants to be competent, he's a good person to listen to.
I want to ask you three one last question, and I hope you can keep it short. But what I'm wondering, because we're going into her last year in power until the next election, of course, what specific thing or area of policy or moment in the coming time will you pay a little bit more attention to see where Giorgia Meloni is moving to? Yes.
I have to start. I mean, I'm super curious what will happen with the EU migration pact in general, not just in Italy, but all
I have to make now a reclame for the Balie, because there's going to be a program about the European migration pact in June. What are you looking forward to? Or not forward to in a sense, what are you going to pay attention to the coming year? Watching her evolve?
Well, we have slightly touched upon that, and that's actually, I don't see any person in Italy right now who could be the next prime minister as from now. That might be completely different tomorrow, but I think it has to be Giorgia Meloni because the coalition and then I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, how will her electoral campaign look like then? It can't be a copy of that one in 2022 because it could be completely, not only strange, but but also very stupid to do so. So it has to change something. And I'm very curious to know, okay, what will be the rhetoric and what will be the direction that the center right of Italy, guided by Meloni, will go to.
It's going to focus on.
Yeah. Also because it then matters what will be the other situations in Europe. Where will France be after Macron? Exactly. What will happen with the AfD in Germany? And that matters obviously. And also what will the midterms do in the United States of America? What will the power be? So, but I think Italy has a lot of domestic problems. And if she hasn't solved them with the reforms, what will be the message in her next electoral campaign? I don't know.
All right. And you, Katarina?
So I think also associated with this, but probably I would look at two things. One, the alternative. So what's PD going to do?
Yeah.
There are some potential candidates.
Everyone is looking at the mayor of Genoa.
Well, but she needs, if they don't change their statutes, she needs the primaries, and that I don't know if she would win those, because those are much more likely to be the members of PD, which are more left-wing than the electoral potential of PD, which we saw with Elly Schleins the last election. So that's one, but like that will be. Who is actually, some people say has some, so the mayor of Genoa has some Meloni type ways of doing things, but of course she has a very different biography and there are very different policies, right? That's very clear. Secondly, what I would look at is actually gas prices. So the Italian economy and the electricity prices come 90% out of gas. It's because there's not been partly it's they also got rid of nuclear. There's not been the reforms. So she has no control over that. Mm-hmm. But that is very important for everything that happens within the Italian economy.
Yeah.
So that's just what you guys were saying.
Well, that's probably also where we are going to look at then. Thank you very much to everyone here in the audience, of course, but specifically to my speakers who were here. And I hope to see you at the bar or another time in the Balie. Good night.
Thanks to you.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.